Inquiry could resume its work in the last week of June. Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo says there are just a few issues that need clarity, such as the interprovincial travel for witnesses. The Commission will also have to conduct its work differently, and cross-examination will be on specific points. Let's chat now to legal journalist Karyn Maughan, who joins me via Skype. Very good evening to Karyn. Great. Thank you very much for joining us here on The Full View this evening. So we're going to have to wait clearly quite a bit longer for President Cyril Ramaphosa to appear before the Commission. He was scheduled to appear in July. That's no longer going to happen. A setback, would you say, given that he was part of the executive when all of this happened?
Well, you know, there are obviously two presidents that are in the firing line, so to speak, in the state capture inquiry. One of them, of course, President Cyril Ramaphosa, in relation to the Bosasa matter. He has agreed to give evidence, no time frame in terms of when that will happen. The other, of course, President Jacob Zuma, who has been involved in somewhat of an acrimonious sort of dispute with the State Capture Commission over whether or not he will appear. Of course, he was very fundamentally unhappy over the fact that the Commission's legal team had brought an application to compel him to appear through a subpoena. At this stage, it does not appear that that has happened to any other potential witnesses. Fighting that, and of course, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo saying that that application for that subpoena is still ongoing and still in the process of being finalized. He said that he'd hoped that the former president would be appearing before the inquiry in the relative near future, but no real time frame, Griselda, at this point over if that application, if and when that application will proceed, and when the inquiry intends to bring the former president before it. Of course, Jacob Zuma due in the Pietermaritzburg High Court on the 23rd of June, roughly the same time period when the Commission of Inquiry will get underway, and real question marks at this point over if his trial will have an impact on his potential appearance before the state capture inquiry.
What was quite clear is in some of the questions and answers there was the Deputy Chief Justice indicating that one of the cases, of course, that will get underway would be that, of course, of the former President Jacob Zuma. But Karyn, one of the other challenges as well is that witnesses would perhaps need to get to Johannesburg and appear before the Commission under the current Level 3 interprovincial travel is still not allowed. Justice Zondo saying he would prefer to have that testimony done in Johannesburg.
Yes, I mean, there was a question from one of the journalists about whether or not these kind of appearances could be done via Zoom and, you know, other electronic media, which, of course, this press conference today was done with. And the Deputy Chief Justice making it very clear that he was not particularly enthusiastic about that issue. Of course, you know, we know that if someone is not in the room when they are being cross-examined and questions may not be particularly palatable to them, you know, technology and the ability to sort of not respond to questions because of distance may be a factor. And, you know, I think that he's saying at this point, the Deputy Chief Justice, that the presidency, that the Justice Minister is very alive and aware of the kind of impact of the regulations on the processes of the inquiry and have been extremely cooperative. But at this point, those thorny issues of cross-examination, we know that the inquiry needs to cross-examine a number of potential witnesses in order to put these, you know, issues to them, the kind of questions that they may face. You know, in order to be fair, that is going to be a pivotal question in terms of the Commission being able to finalize its processes fairly and not face the possibility, Griselda, that they can be accused of being one-sided in the kind of evidence that they've led.
One of the other key issues is the release of an interim report. It did not seem that Justice Zondo is opposed to the idea, but it does seem the challenge could be the names perhaps of individuals that appear in multiple, if I can, work streams.
Well, this is the big issue. You know, there are multiple factors that the Deputy Chief Justice is considering at this point. One of them, of course, you know, we saw Minister Pravin Gordhan when he gave his evidence raising this issue, and I think that was in October 2018, of a potential interim report that could be released by the Zondo inquiry. We have in the recent weeks and months seen that a number of groups, you know, public interest groups coming forward and saying that this is really a mechanism mechanism by which the inquiry can give the public insight into some of the conclusions that they've reached. But, there are ongoing processes, investigations into a number of the state-owned enterprises. Do some then get included in this inquiry, in this potential interim report? Are some excluded? And I think that one of the issues that he didn't raise, but certainly one of the issues which, the legal community will be looking at is the status of an interim report and whether or not that will be open or potentially, vulnerable to legal challenge if and when it is released.
Yeah. Just very quickly before I let you go, Karyn, another setback it might seem for government, the High Court ruling that COVID-19 patients cannot be forced into state quarantine. What are the implications of this?
Well, essentially, government did not oppose that case, or doesn't appear to have opposed, and that agreement was actually a two-page agreement reached between government and AfriForum. So, it is interesting that AfriForum is claiming this as a legal victory. I think government would in turn argue that, it was simply clarifying that if people are in a position to self-isolate and are prepared to do so in a room that they do not share with anyone else, that would be, that government would be amenable to it and wouldn't want to force people into quarantine in circumstances where they can self-isolate. So it really is about a reading of that particular issue.
Karyn, thank you very much indeed for your time. Legal journalist Karyn Maughan, thank you very much for joining us here on The Full View this evening.